In the previous sections, we've discussed the application of GST at the rate of 10%. Now, in this section, you will learn how to derive, apply, and use the GST formulas for any given GST rate. Now, to determine the formulas, let's consider this product represented by this block, whose price before tax is PE, after tax is PI, and GST is the tax amount which is applicable at any variable rate. For instance, we will call it R. So R is any GST rate and is expressed in percentages. Now, here is a list of the GST formulas applicable for any GST rate. Let's go through each, and remember that R is any GST rate and is expressed in percentages. Now, starting with formula number 1, it is exactly the same, irrespective of the GST rate, whether it's actually 10%, 20%, or any other rate. GST formula number 1 still valid. And to prove it, we simply say, let's say, for example, I have a product after tax with the value of $22 and before tax of $20. So the GST amount is simply the differential between the two prices, which is 22 minus 20. So the GST amount is $2. The GST amount is $2. Now, the GST rate is not actually shown here, but I can still see that to jump from $20 to 22, there is a tax rate of 20%. So the tax rate is built in the formula, but it's not actually shown here. So the bottom line to prove equation number 1 is simply, for any GST rate, you simply subtract the prices before and after tax. Now, moving on to equation number 2, it states that the actual GST amount can be calculated by simply multiplying the price before tax or the retail recommended price by the GST rate, any GST rate. So let's say, for example, my GST rate is 18%. So if that's the case, GST amount can be calculated using formula number 2 by multiplying 18% by the price before tax. Now, to simplify this, that is equal to 0.18 times PE. Let's say, for example, my tax rate is 22%. Then my GST amount would be equal to 0.22 times PE. If it is 30%, it is 0.3 times PE. So it is simple, straightforward. You simply multiply the tax rate by the price before tax for any GST amount. Now, equation number 3 is really the interesting one, which requires calculating the GST amount when I have the price after tax. And if you recall from the previous sections, when the rate was 10%, that formula equates into something like GST equal PI over 11. So let's see what does the formula look like, when we apply it for any rate. So let's start with equation with the tax rate of, say, again 18%. What formula number 3 dictates is that you simply put the rate on the top and also at the bottom, but at the bottom you just add 100% to it and then multiply the whole lot by PI. So if the GST rate is 18%, my GST amount is equal to the rate itself, which is 18%, over the rate itself at the bottom, but you add 100% to it. So it's 118%. Remember, you always add 100% to the rate. And the whole thing is multiplied by the price including GST. So let's say, for example, my tax is 22%, then really my GST amount is equal to 22% over 122% multiplied by the price including tax. If my tax rate is 30%, so it's really 30% the GST amount over 130%. And so on. Now moving on to equation number 4, which describes the relationship between the price before and after tax when at any given GST rate. So it states the following: to calculate the price including GST when the price excluding GST is given, you simply take the rate, whatever the rate is in percentages, and you add 1 to it. So let's take an example. If R equal 18%, and so my price after tax is equal to 1 plus 18%. 1 plus 18% multiplied by the price before tax. So that can be simplified into something like 1.18 times PE. If my tax rate is 22%, then my PI becomes 1 plus 22% times PE, which is equal to 1.22 times PE. And for 30%, PI becomes equal to 1.3 times the price excluding GST, and so on. Now notice how we have this number here, 18. If I have the tax rate is 18, so really it's 1.18, and this 18 comes from the tax rate itself. Again, 22%, it's 1.22, and 22 comes from the 22%, and so on. Now, equation number 5 is more or less like equation number 4, but this time we just swap it the other way around. I have the price including GST, and I need to calculate the price before. So let's say, for example, my rate is 18%, and I would like to know what is my recommended retail price if the GST rate is 18% and the price after tax is already given. So as per equation number 5, what I have to do is take PE equal the price after tax, and then at the bottom it's 1 plus the rate itself, which is 18%. Now that equals to PI over 1.18. Just notice the difference between this formula and that formula. Here we multiply by 1.18. Here we divide by 1.18. In the case of, say, the rate is 22%, my price, or my formula number 5, becomes PI over 1 plus 22%, and that equals to 1.22. And when the GST rate is 30%, again, that equal to PI over 1.30, and so on. Now let's look at this example where the tax rate is equal to 15%. And let's go ahead and reflect that tax rate right across the board and see what the formulas look like at that rate. Starting with formula number 1, well, formula number 1 doesn't change. And this is simply because, and as I said before, the tax rate is not part of the formula 1. In other words, it's not really reflected in it. So it stays exactly the same and doesn't change at all. Now, in terms of formula number 2, it states that the GST amount is equal to 15% of the retailer recommended price, or PE, which is the price excluding GST. So we can simplify this as, because 15% is 15 over 100 times PE, In other words, it's 0.15 times PE. Now, from a tax point of view, what the taxman wants from the retailer, as per this formula, he's telling him to take 15% of the retailer recommended price. So if we come here and divide this into pieces, well, let's say each piece represents something like 15%. So the taxman is telling the retailer to take 15% of his recommended retail price and add it on top of that, and that becomes the GST amount, which is really 15%. So that's all what formula number 2 is all about. In terms of formula number 3, another way of calculating the GST amount, it states that if you have a GST rate of 15%, then I can calculate the GST amount as follows. So GST is equal to 15% over, remember, 115%, and then multiply the whole lot by the price, including GST. That can be simplified into something like 15 over 115 times PI. You can take it one step further if you like. 15 over 115 is equal to 3 over 23 times PI. So that becomes the GST amount. So really, from a tax point of view, so the taxman this time, instead of asking the retailer to take, as per formula 2, 15% of the retailer recommended price, he's telling him, as per formula number 3, I want you to give me 3 over 23 of the total amount collected from the customer. So if the customer pays an amount of PI, then the GST amount becomes the 3 over 23rd of that. And that's what formula number 3 is all about. Now, in terms of formula number 4, again, this is to do with calculating the prices before and after tax. In our case, the price before or after tax is equal to 1 plus 15% times PE. And that can be simplified into something like 1.15 times PE. Equation number 5, using the rate of 15%, this time instead of multiplying, we take the price after tax and we divide it by 1 plus then the tax rate of 15%. And that equals to 1.15.